Hello everyone, thanks very much for joining. The time's 7:30, so I think we'll make a start. Welcome all to the first Predictwind weather briefing we've done for a jog race. The race is the Stoneways Marine Lonely Tower race. Thank you to Stoneways Marine for sponsoring. Just so you know, as a jog member, you can get a discount on Predictwind membership of 20%. The discount's available through the jog members area. So it's a really good program, and it's probably much better priced than some of the more expensive race routing programs. So definitely worth having a look. My name's Will Preston. I'll be doing part of the brief. I sail on a JPK 1010 in Class 2, and I'll be doing the brief alongside Will McGuff, who races a J109 just so, also in Class 2. We'll make a start. If we'll look at the synoptic level weather first, we'll just have a look at the pressure chart. So looking at the time I've just set it to here is about 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning on Saturday. We have a high pressure system situated over northern England and Scotland, and that's going to be giving us easterly or northeasterly winds, about 10 to 15 knots, potentially with gusts up to 20 knots. Perhaps those gusts are only going to be seen once we get clear of the forts and are out heading towards Now Tower. If we look at the wind map and zoom right in on the Solent, we can see during the day, so that little spot there is about just north of Cowes, and as we run through from the start of the race, we're seeing 12 knots, 13 knots into the afternoon, typically around 12 knots generally. In terms of direction, starting at the start of the race is going to be perhaps 060, veering towards perhaps 080. And then much later on, probably by the time we've all finished, heading back towards 060. In terms of gusts, this is what I found particularly interesting looking at the weather for this race, is that how much stronger the gusts are compared to sort of a mean wind. So if we come back to the start of the race, we're seeing 12 knots as the mean wind, with gusts up to 20 knots during the day, which I think is, is quite a big difference to me, having a mean wind of 10 and a gust of 20. What we'll do now is do an overview of the course, starting on the start line. So we'll just cover a few sort of housekeeping items. So if this is your first jog race, you'll need to all boats taking part in jog races need to go through the identity gate. The identity gate is between the yellow mark, the special mark off Egypt Point, and the shore. There's the jog start box. It's about 50 meters east of Egypt Point. There's a mast behind it, and it may fly a jog burgee, but it should be pretty visible. What you'll expect to see is you'll have a whole stream of boats streaming down here round the mark, and then heading off north and back direction to clear the start. So you'll need to head through the identity gate with all the crew wearing life jackets and harnesses, and wait for visual acknowledgement from the shore. The start's going to be run on VHF channel M1, also 37A, and the start call sign is jog 1. The first start's going to be at 9:30 for Class 4, and then there'll be a start every 15 minutes until all 4 classes have started. The start sequence is 10, 5, 1, go. There is a strong possibility that the alternative start line will be used. The alternative start line is on the same bearing as the ordinary start line, which runs from the start box to the Gurnard North Cardinal, but it extends the start line to the outer limit of Northeast Gurnard, which is this red buoy up here. So if we imagine a line drawn all the way up to there, approximately, that's our start line, potentially. If the alternative start line is going to be used, it'll be announced on the VHF channel M1, and also a turquoise flag will be flown from the start box. If this is people's first time doing a jog race, just to emphasise, we don't start on the Royal Yacht Squadron start line. We start on the jog start line, which is off Egypt Point. So starting on the start line, we're then going to head east. We need to leave the Snowdon buoy to starboard. In light airs with the following tide, it can sometimes be tricky to get north of it, but with the wind we're expecting, I don't appreciate anyone will have a particular issue getting around that buoy. We're then going to head down the Solent. It's unlikely, in my opinion, that Bramble Bank will play any role in this race unless the wind is much lighter than anticipated. Ride Middle Bank does present some opportunities to avoid the tide if the tide is foul. If the tide is fair, you want to be clear of it to get the fair tide in the deeper water north or south of the bank. Osborne Bay, me personally, I don't believe it's going to be particularly significant in this race at all. In my general opinion, you do your best to avoid it. Rounding No Man's Land Fort, leaving it to starboard. Between the forts and Nab Tower, there's nothing of particular navigational significance. We'll then round Nab Tower, leaving it to port. Just one thing to bear in mind from safety of navigation perspective, you've got the deep water channel on the starboard side of the ley line, with potential for deep draft vessels with minimum manoeuvrability heading down it, who will then turn in towards the Solent here. So you don't want to be meeting them on this course particularly, and you certainly need to keep out of their way. We'll then be rounding Winner to port. There's some opportunities perhaps to get out of foul tide heading north of the ley line if the wind suggests that's a sensible angle to sail. And then again back through past Horsesound Fort, again there's opportunities to avoid tide in the shallow water off Portsmouth and potentially along the shoreline between Gilkicker Point and Leon Solent. Heading back towards the finish, Ride Middle Bank probably present some good opportunities to avoid foul tide. And then to finish, we need to leave Prince Consort to starboard and through the finish line. Just to emphasize, if the start line is extended, the finish line is not extended. The finish line is never extended. The finish line is between Egypt Point and the Gurnard North Cardinal. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to run the routing for this race on a JPK 1010, my boat, and then we're going to have a go at the routing on an A-sail boat and then one of the smaller boats in Class 4, just so we explore all the options. If anybody has any questions, please do use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. There's a tag for Q&A. You can type your question in there, and then we can either do our best to answer it, or we'll invite you to give your opinion if you like. So I'll do the routing now. So if you've never used Predictwind before, it's a really good tool, and there are both there's free licenses you can use. You don't get all the functionality of the paid license, but you certainly get many of the forecasts, and the key thing you don't get is the routing function. So I've set the start time for 10 o'clock, which is the Class 2 start, and it's running on the JPK, and we'll see what's going to happen. And at this point, I'd like to hand over to Will McGuff to take over and do the talking.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll see this running because they update all the forecasts at about 7:20. So neither of us have actually seen this output. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out. While that's running in the background, I'm going to just talk through the different legs and what we had a long conversation yesterday and today about what we see as the options and questions. I'm going to start with a caveat that I imagine you're probably going to leave this conversation with more questions than answers. But if you've got any questions or any points you want to make, as Will said, please put it in the chat. The first thing, start-wise, the longer start line opens some quite interesting opportunities, especially if we're talking around Class 4. with the earlier 9:30 start. So at 9:30, you still got full tide across the whole course running to the west. So there is an opportunity to start far north end of the line, get the tidal relief under Bramblebank and north of all the channels. Having looked at it, the pin end of the line in that case is half a mile further from the fort. So there's a big balancing act there between the tidal relief and the extra distance. In my mind as well, it also really comes down to probably 10-20 degrees on the wind direction. So the forecasts are showing between 060 to 070, 080, depending on which model you believe. And with that, then what you don't want to do is end up in a situation where you're sailing that extra distance, but the wind is far enough north that the boats in the middle or the island end of the line can still lay the fort. So lots of questions there. As we roll through the start sequence, certainly by the time of class 1 starting at 10:15, I would fully expect the back eddy to be running off cows. I don't know with the wind direction how good the wind will be in there. So again, it's another case of judging all the trade-offs and making a decision. From my position, looking at class 2 start, I don't think we'll know our plan until 10-15 minutes before the start, when we see the exact timing of the tide shifts and the exact wind we've got at the start. So that's my views currently on the start. And then I'll pause talking, and well, if you want to show what the routing's come up with for your 10-10.
Yeah, so for people who haven't seen Predictwind before, each one of these coloured lines is showing the routing using a different weather model. There are a selection of weather models. So there's the GFS, the European one, the UKMO, Spire, and then Predictwind take the GFS and the European, apply their own routing logic to them, which is why they're all different. So if we run down the first leg, I've picked a relatively arbitrary start point, which is further north of the line than you would ordinarily do. This assumes that the alternative starts in force. And I'll hand over to Will again, just running down this leg.
Yeah, so down the leg, it's going to be a beat. And the sort of key things for the first half, in my mind, is keeping an eye on the tide. So a comparison, having somewhere visible a comparison between heading and cog is always a good idea in that. So you can, because there's certainly as you go along these different bits, there's different, you can monitor whether you're in and out the tide. And then again, it really comes down to wind angle. So as you can see from the routings, most of these are showing that it's far enough north you can straight line to the fort. There's one or two beats in there. So obviously if it's further east and it's a pure beat, you've got a lot more options for getting out of the tide without sailing extra distance. Whereas the further north it is, the more likely it is to be a straight line. And actually going back towards my discussion about the start, this also plays a part. If you think it's a straight line, the key thing coming off the start is going to be clear air, because if you can lay it in one tack, any starboard tack to clear your air is going to be an incredibly painful bit of experience. But I think it's going to be looking at the routings and looking at the weather, mainly port. But the key differential as to what your options are is going to be how much, if any, starboard is in this leg, and monitoring the tide. Sort of certainly in the second half of the leg, I'm expecting the tide to be reasonably consistent across the course. And in that case, it will come down to more wind holes, wind shifts, and clean air. Moving on and looking at the routing, going from the fort to the Nab Tower, I think in all forecasts, this is pretty much a straight line. None of the ones that I've seen look broad enough to get anything other than a jib up. So this will just be a straight line drag race, seeing what you can do boat speed and just making sure you've got everything trimmed right. So outboard leads on jibs and things like that. And then down this leg should be setting up for the next leg north to Winner. Now, again, this is another one I'm going to caveat quite a lot. Depending on which forecast you believe, some of them have it shifting more east through the day. I don't know if this model still does, but the ones I was looking at earlier had it shifting more east by the time you got to this leg. Some didn't. So there's a chance that for some boats you might get something up on this leg, depending on the combination of angle, wind speed, and wind direction. There's a possibility of a code 0 or jib top or something like that if that's in your inventory. Otherwise, again, another straight line. There's no real tactical choices other than sail along this leg. So then you move to the final leg, which is I view this almost as one long, I think it's the way I'm thinking of this is one long leg with 2 passing marks. So between the forts. So this is almost certainly a kite for every boat. The question, and this has been varying as we've been running routings this week, is whether the optimum strategy is VMG angles, and that which will then open up opportunities to get in out the tide, or whether it's far enough north that it's actually a straight rumline run all the way along the straight to the finish. And as mentioned sort of in the course overview, making sure to leave Prince Consort to starboard, which I think is a new addition this year to this race. I'm not sure if it was in last year's, and both of us, when we were doing our pre-race planning, missed it the first time round. So do be aware of that one. So I think that's sort of the summary, and it's sort of all a bit up in the air, but I'll happy to take any questions if there are any out there.
Just while people are thinking of asking questions, I'll just run the routing again, and we'll use a different boat. So we'll use an Albin Express 26, because it's one of the lowest rated boats in the class. So we can run the routing again on a different boat, and I'll change the start time to 9:30. We can route that, see how it looks. So I'll talk for this one through if you like, Will. So what we're seeing here, I think, with the earlier start in the smaller boats, is it's definitely more of an attacking match to get around the forts without the opportunity to lay it in one. It's probably partly to do with the tide is worse for the boat starting earlier, just because it's still running more strongly to the west, and so most of the routes look like they're heading inshore towards Ryde Sands, and then tacking out again to lay the forts. In terms of the run to the forts, to the nav tower, doesn't look to be anything particularly different to what we're used to in terms of the run line to winner again. And then all these routes are suggesting it's just a run line run all the way down to the finish. So really the challenge for the earlier boats will be the first leg getting to the forts in the stronger tide. What we can do, just for interest's sake, is I'll move the start line much nearer the shoreline. We could just run the routing again and see if that has any appreciable difference on the strategy.
Okay, while you're running that, Martin, the jug secretary and the race officer for Saturday, has pointed out the Prince Consort allows the reason that's in there is to line boats up for the finish and make it a easier and cleaner job for race officers. Thank you, Martin.
So just for people, those error message is we were getting those just to do with the logic of how it's routing us just on this shoreline, because you see we're just touching the shoreline there, and I'm on the finish. So doing the start inshore, still suggesting running along the shoreline of the Isle of Wight. Not particularly different. The key challenge, I think, if you were to start inshore, is just the tide is stronger near Cowes than it is slightly further offshore, and it's getting around that if you can. I think would be the key challenge for smaller boats. But beyond that, there's no real difference in the course. If we try the routing for a faster, an A sailboat, so a J109, set the start time back to 10.
I think the only other thing to highlight with that smaller boat in off Cowes, and I don't have the data in front of me, but there are exclusion zones around the breakwater, and I can't remember off the top of my head what they are this year, because I believe they've been updated, but just to be aware, there are exclusion zones. Question, Will, from the panel: what tide data are you using for the routing?
Yeah, so in all honesty, the tidal data is, for Predictwind, a bit of a black box. It's currently set to RTOFS. It is doing tidal data routing, but I'm not 100% sure what model it's using, being absolutely honest. The tidal data I'm looking at myself in terms of my own planning is the Winning Tides Atlas, and which uses Portsmouth high water. That's my answer to that. So this is running a J109, starting at 10. So starting right inshore, you're not getting the opportunity to lay the forts in one go if you start right inshore. Again, they're suggesting tacking in and out to lay the forts. In terms of the angles you'll be sailing on the downwind legs, you've got some courses taking a very definite hitch in towards Portsmouth between the forts and Winnerboy to play the angles. But on the actual run from the fort, they're not hugely different from the run line, apart from this light orange leg here, which is the UKMO forecast. They're probably bit more angly for some of them, if that's that's a word, but generally not too far for run line for a J109. If anybody has a particular type of boat they'd like routed right now, just let me know in the question panel, and we can route it right now.
Martin's also given an answer to my earlier question, which is the exclusion zones for Jug are keep north of the breakwater and north of Snowdon, both in and out. So I hope that answers the question when off Cowes.
An Alacrity 18. Let's get an Alacrity 18 up. Hopefully we have. I'm really sorry, it doesn't look like they have an Alacrity 18 in their list. Let's take it out to 35. Let's see. A laser 28. Oh, sorry, George, there's no cigar to 35. We'll try a laser 28. There's no laser 28 in here. What you can do is you can submit your polos to Predictwind, and they'll upload them into the system, so we could all have a look at them. So Benito, first 31. I could do a first 31.7, which I imagine is not the same as the first 31, but we'll give it a go. And then we'll have a go at an Impala. So the first 31. Again, much like the other routes, a long port leg heading inshore towards the Isle of Wight off ride, and then tacking out to lay the forts. Straight run lines to now Town, then Winner. Slightly different options here, actually, what we're seeing with the leg from Winner to the forts again. One of the legs unusually, well, it's the only route that's done it, I think, but the ones we've looked at is heading south of the run line. And then that route is then taking a longer, the green route here I was looking at, taking a longer hitch out on the starboard side of the ley line to come and finish on port tack. And the J70.
Don't forget the Impala as well.
Yeah, I won't forget the Impala.
Just make
So
sure I'm not too quick on clicking acknowledged.
A J70, I imagine, would be class 4. So take a punt on class 4. And then we'll look at an Impala and see if there's an open 7.5. So here's J70. Interestingly, one of the routes is suggesting a hitch out. To me, with this hitch out on starboard here on the green route, it's saying start further up the start line to give you a better run in to the mark. That's what it's saying to me. Some of the routes are suggesting really banging the corner on these cows there, right close inshore. And again, they're generally staying inshore, hitching out to the forts, rum lines to now town winner, and then playing slightly more aggressive angles on the J70, heading in towards the finish. Let's try an Impala. No Impala, I'm afraid. And open 70, open 7.5. I'm afraid it doesn't look like we have any open 7.5s here. No. Are there any other boats or any other questions people have? Happy to spend as long as it takes to route every single boat in the fleet if need be. Someone's put their hand up. Hi, Martin. I'll just let you speak, Martin, if you'd like to. You can now. Oh, sorry, Matthew. Sunfast 3300. No problem. Let's have a look. So there's no Sunfast 3300, but I'll see if we can get you something similar. If there's a JPK 1030, perhaps. Appreciating they are different boats, we'll give you a Sunfast 3600, although I fully appreciate it's a completely different boat to 3300. And that will be starting, I'm guessing, at 10 o'clock. Trina, thoughts now, to winner. So this is the 3600, and generally just heading more aggressive angles inshore on the leg from winner back to the forts in terms of the final run in. Interestingly, some different choices going on here. A real split in the selected routes for 3600. Someone's just asked about what's happening on Sunday. So we'll just run the routing on Sunday. Yeah, so well, there was a point that apparently it's under JSF 3300, if you want to just quickly run the 3300. Okay. It's under J, apparently. JSF. Do this quickly. 3300. There's actually two in there for some reason. I've got it open on the other screen. And then we'll come to Sunday at the end. We'll go for the KR. I'm not quite sure what the difference is. I'm guessing that be a 10 o'clock start. Let's route that. While you're routing that, I'll answer Kelvin to the angle, the true wind angle between forts and nab to winner. Other boats may vary. I've got the 109 one open on the other screen. What you're looking at is about 60 to 70 on port for the forts to nab, and then about 100 to 110 on starboard from nab to winner. That's across the models. It's a little variable depending on which model, and
as I sort of said, I think most of the forecasts have it going slightly further east as the day goes on. So depending on boat speed, it might change a bit. But yeah, anticipating 60 to 70 degrees from Forts to Nab and 100 to 110 Nab to Winner.
On the 3300, the same story as most routes we've seen, hugging the island shore to avoid to have a long leg on port tack before rounding the forts. Rum line, forts to Nab, Nab to Winner. Interestingly, at Winner, we're then seeing much more aggressive angles, both north and south. There's a little, the software doesn't quite appreciate we need to go back through the forts, but there's essentially two schools of thought. There's, once you round, you're back in the Solent, you can either sail the rum line, or you've got these routes here, which are then running back along basically Osborne Bay side to avoid the worst of the tide, getting right close in the shore, playing more aggressive angles. What we'll do now, just run a route for Sunday on the Great Escape.
While you're running that, I'm just going to read out the notice Martin sent through as the race officer for Saturday. Please do listen on VHF and look for the turquoise blue flag on Saturday to make sure if the line extension is in use. In light as air and with nearly 3/4 mile navigable line, the final decision will only be made on Saturday morning. Similarly on Sunday, although at the moment the plan is to not use the long line on Sunday as there are less boats in the fleet. Guy, question that have we ever run it as a retrospective to look at actual race versus the predicted? I've never done that, but I don't know if you have.
Guys, it doesn't really exactly answer your question as you asked it, but within Predictwind there is what's called validation, and that compares the accuracy of the forecast with what actually happened. It lists the models in terms of their from sort of best to worst, and it does it over mean average error wind speed over the last week or over the last month, and then it does mean average error in direction. Generally the spread between the speeds isn't massive, but the spreads between the directions can be quite significant. The Rome model, which has come out in top on 3 of the categories, that is it's a 1 kilometer resolution model. So it's the highest resolution. It looks at in the most detail at a particular area, and so for that one, looking one day ahead, it's got an average error of 17 degrees in direction, which interestingly isn't the best, but is the best in average over 2 days. And then wind speeds, 4 knot errors. It's not massive, particularly in my opinion. So it doesn't quite answer your question, but it goes hopefully a little bit of the way too. Question: what time is first start on Sunday?
Just looking at that in the background, so the front page says
first start's 9:30 on the Sunday.
Yeah, just be aware. I've just noticed when looking this up that the front page of the program says not 10:30, but the SIs say 9:30. Just so everyone's aware, so it is a 9:30 first start.
Yeah. So I've just done the JPK in class 2, starting at 10. Wind again northeasterly, perhaps a little bit east of northeasterly. So it'll be a start on the run. I'll be looking to start starboard pole, heading out into the deeper water, and then heading sort of the north side of the leg. Basically it'll be a game of playing the wind angles downwind and optimizing for tide. Then round Bridge Buoy, and it's back in again, which point I think you'll be getting foul tide, and so most of the routes are looking to hug the mainland side of the course in the shallow water there before heading over towards the finish. Although a lot of the routes like banging right in at Gurnard, although I don't think it would necessarily suit me personally to do that. A couple of people just raising the point about the clock change. So the clocks do go forward on what will be our Saturday night. And so they go forward 1 hour, so things are going to happen an hour early than they did before. Just so everyone's aware of that. Any other questions or comments at this stage? Managed to keep most of you looking at the attendee numbers, which is good. But any questions at all? No. Anything to add, Will, for the Sunday?
For the Sunday, I think it's basically an inverted long windward leeward. So it's going to be keep out the tide, probably in some ways, sort of definitely on the downwind. Will be interesting on the upwind, depending on timings. And yeah, just keep an eye on the wind and try and play the shifts while staying at the tide, and just giant windward leeward wrong way round.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for everyone's time. If anyone does have any questions in the next few minutes, I'll just leave it running, and me and Will will sit here and answer them as they come in. But if there's nothing else, please go and enjoy the rest of your Thursday evening. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, I've just routed the 109 here on the Sunday.
Oh, that's some big angles down. I always find it hard with these things to work out which way is which, but that looks like some big angles, hitting some corners upwind.
Yeah, it's quite various opinions. Immediate start, so sort of north of Newtown Creek, but once you get over there, they all seem to converge just about here, and then just straight line it, and then on the way home they're much of a muchness, really. Just
and it'll have the classic Lymington based boat annoyance that will pretty much sail past the berth and be able to smell the Sunday lunch and keep going for another 3 hours.
Try the Alden Express, like my go-to small boat.
It's also going to be
Still got a couple people kicking about.
Yeah, it's going to be a painfully early start on Sunday morning with the clock changing.
Yeah. Right, so an Albion Express, straight line, pretty much down to the mark. Then a bit of a difference of opinion. Some routes favouring the sort of Gurnard, leading into Gurnard Shore.
Yeah. What have you got? Because I noticed when I was playing around with it, the depth setting. What have you got the depth setting?
So I've got this depth setting to land.
That's what I route to, much to the owner's disappointment. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to assume there's no more questions coming, so I'm going to drop off. But
yeah,
thank you all
cheers,
for
Will.
coming, and cheers, and
see you at the weekend.
See you at the weekend. Bye.